The void comes before the light. And perhaps you have already felt it, without knowing exactly what it was. It is like a silence that does not come from outside, but from within. A thick, dense silence that takes over your body when everything around you still seems to follow its usual rhythm. You continue going to the same places, talking to the same people, doing the same things. But something inside you no longer responds. It is as if there were an internal room that has been locked, only this time you are on the inside. At first it may seem like just tiredness. It may disguise itself as a sudden lack of motivation, a slight apathy, or a strange sleepiness that does not go away even with rest. But if you listen carefully, there is something there. It is the harbinger of awakening. Because awakening rarely begins with a party, it begins with emptiness. Before something new can be born, the old must die. And you feel it, even without understanding it. What used to give you pleasure no longer excites you. Old plans do not excite you. Certainties, one by one, seem to dissolve into the fog, and the world looks at you normally. But you know that something silent is changing profoundly. This is the first sign of awakening, the discomfort of emptiness, not the emptiness of depression, which paralyzes and numbs, but the emptiness of the crossing, the one that precedes birth, like the deep silence in the womb before the first breath. You are between worlds, and that is why you feel so much. And in this space, small clues begin to appear. An untimely shiver, a thought that arrives unbidden, the feeling of being watched when you are alone. You may ignore it at first, but deep down, you realize something is trying to call you inside. And it is in this silence that you begin to listen, not with your ears, but with something that has always been inside you, and that now begins to awaken. Your inner world expands. The nights become longer, your dreams more intense. Your encounters stranger. You begin to notice things that you had not seen before. A symbol on a wall, a butterfly that insists on crossing your path, a song that plays and seems to speak exactly to your soul. None of this is by chance. None of this is a coincidence. Everything is preparing you to see with new eyes. You begin to feel as if you were waiting for something, but you don't know what. As if there were a door about to open, and you were standing in front of it. The hours pass, the days go by, but the feeling persists. You can try distractions. You can force smiles, commitments, goals. But the silent voice of emptiness returns, like a muffled bell that insists on ringing inside your chest. Perhaps at this moment, you think you are going crazy, or that you have lost your way. But listen carefully. This is exactly what awakening does. It deconstructs. It silences the noise so that you can hear the true melody that has always been hidden beneath the chaos of the world. And in this process, you begin to withdraw. You withdraw from empty conversations, from noisy places, from soulless commitments. You can't explain why, but you simply can't sustain the same kind of energy anymore. You're no longer available for what has no essence. And all of this can be lonely, but also necessary. Many, when they feel this call, retreat. They go back to filling the silence with noise. They look for distractions, stimuli, occupations. But you, if you've come this far, maybe you're starting to listen, to hear what the silence wants to say. And the silence always has something to say. Maybe you wake up in the middle of the night with a strange feeling. Or you cry out of nowhere, without knowing why. Or you have a sudden urge to write, to walk barefoot, to get away from everything. This is your spirit moving. It's the light trying to find a path within matter. It's you being crossed by something greater. And at this point in the process, everything that is superficial begins to fall. The masks become heavy. The internal lies unbearable. and the world begins to seem too small, not in size but in depth. Nothing seems to contain you, because something inside you has expanded, even without your permission. And here, in this initial stage, something that few people talk about when it comes to awakening arises: confusion. You may feel like you are losing your identity, and in a way, you are. But what is going is not you. It is just the conditioned, constructed, domesticated version of who you thought you were. The character is dying so that the spirit can live. And this hurts. It hurts like childbirth hurts, but it is also sacred like childbirth. If you feel like you are in this place, in this in-between, in this gap, in this void, know that you are not alone. Many awakenings begin this way, with the dissolution of what was, and you don't need to understand everything right now. The silence is teaching you. Take a deep breath at this moment. Allow yourself to feel. And if this message is touching you, if something inside you whispers a silent yes, like this video, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments, "I recognize the sacred silence." Because when you name the invisible, you bring it closer. And the invisible has much more to show you. You have started to remember. And this is just the beginning. You look around and something seems out of place. Not because the world has changed, but because the eyes with which you see it are no longer the same. What once motivated you no longer sparks your interest. The achievements that seemed so important now seem empty. The goals you set so hard simply don't mean anything to you anymore. You're not getting lost. You're finding yourself. But the path to rediscovery involves, first, getting rid of everything that isn't you. The old compass that guided your life, based on approvals, status, material achievements, titles, external promises, begins to fail. And this doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. One day you realize that your dream job no longer feeds you. The next, you realize that the person you swore you loved no longer understands you. Then comes the lack of enthusiasm when you wake up, as if you were being asked to leave the stage, as if the script of life you were following was no longer yours. This is where the old sense of purpose dissolves. But don't be scared, because in the dissolution of illusion, truth emerges, and it begins silently, with an impulse to seek what is real. A book that appears, a phrase that moves you, a symbol, a childhood memory, a smell that transports you to a safe place. Little by little, what you called normal shows itself to be fragile, and what was once invisible becomes the only thing that sustains you. The structures of your old identity begin to crumble. Pride gives way to humility, haste to silence, control to surrender. You begin to realize that what defined you was made up of fragile layers: your profession, your surname, your traumas, your compliments. All of this begins to fall like dry leaves at the end of autumn. And when these leaves fall, you begin to see the roots. You feel the displacement. You are in environments that used to be familiar, but it seems that you are only there physically. It is like living in two worlds at the same time. You hear conversations and think, "How did I not see this before?" Or perhaps you find yourself saying things you would never say, accessing wisdom that seems to come from a place other than your mind. It is your spirit beginning to inhabit your entire body. This new meaning does not come as an immediate response. It reveals itself over time, in layers. And at first it shows itself more through contrast. Everything that is not part of your essence begins to scream. Relationships that supported your old self become suffocating. Activities that distracted you now seem exhausting. Even your diet may change. Your body begins to reject what is not consistent with this new state of being. Your organism responds, your skin feels, your breathing changes, and perhaps, for the first time, you realize that you are surviving and not living. It is at this point that the second sign of awakening presents itself more strongly. Things lose their meaning, yes, but only so that another can be born. A deeper meaning, more silent, more real. And this only happens because something in you finally wants to live truthfully. You start to question, but not with rebellion, but with a kind of ancient wisdom. Why do I believe what I believe? Who told me this was success? What is happiness, really? Why do I always repeat the same patterns? It is at this point that the veil of illusion begins to tear. And as the old loses its shine, a new path begins to flicker. Fragile, almost invisible, like a thread of light in the darkness. And you feel the urge to follow it, even without knowing where it will lead. This is the call of the soul, a call that does not shout, it whispers. But, once heard, it can never be forgotten. You begin to realize that, in truth, you have always been searching for something that was already within you, that the journey was never outward, that truth does not live in what is shown, but in what is felt, and that the meaning of life is not found. It is revealed within, in silence, in the void. The old is falling, the new is being born, and you are ready. You are walking down the street, lost in your own thoughts, and a song starts playing. It's the one you heard at a decisive moment in your life. You haven't heard it in years. At that very moment, a phrase in the lyrics seems to answer exactly the question that had been tormenting you. You feel a chill, a slight shiver on the back of your neck. It's not fear. It's a silent confirmation that something bigger is watching you. In the following days, patterns begin to emerge. You see repeating numbers, 11, 11, 22, 22, 5, 5. Names appear in sequence. People you haven't seen in years reappear, unexpectedly in random places. And they don't just appear. They bring phrases, gestures, memories, messages that touch a precise point in your soul. As if each encounter had been planned in advance. As if everything was connected. The synchronicities arrive first as curious coincidences, but in a short time, they accumulate in an uncomfortable way. Uncomfortable because they break your logic, because there is no rational explanation, because they force you to admit that maybe you've never been alone, not in chaos, not in silence, not in confusion. It's as if the universe leaves clues, and for the first time, you start to notice them. You think of someone, and they send you a message. You feel something strange, and hours later you discover that something happened to the person who was on your mind. You open a random book and read exactly the answer you've been looking for days. Even words start to repeat themselves. The same term appears in conversations, videos, dreams, posts. It's as if reality is trying to wake you up. As if God is using life itself as a communication tool. And that moves you, because these synchronicities are not just beautiful, they are disturbing. They force you to pay attention, to be more present, to ask yourself, what is this trying to show me? And the more you ask, the more signs appear. Not by magic, but because you are more awake. Your soul is listening. Your sensitivity is emerging. Your mind, which previously needed proof and explanations, begins to bend before the mystery. But there is something important at this point. The signs do not come only to comfort. Sometimes they bother. They repeat, patterns that you wanted to forget. They bring to the surface themes that you thought were resolved. They show, through repetition, where there is still imbalance, where there is still a lie, where there is still blockage. It is a kind of cosmic mirror, reflecting in symbolic detail what you still need to see. And you see. You begin to dream more, to have premonitions, to feel the environment, people, the objects, a presence becomes constant, not in the fantasy sense, but as a silent certainty that something is guiding everything with precision. The delays, the encounters, the losses, the deviations, each one of them carries a code, and in this new state of perception, the code becomes visible, and you finally understand. Nothing is by chance. It never was. The pain arrives as it always has, intense, uncomfortable, harsh. But now something inside you changes. You don't run. You don't deny it. You don't get distracted. Instead, you remain there, motionless, in the face of discomfort, like someone watching a storm without opening their umbrella. For the first time, you don't try to escape, and it is at this moment that the pain begins to transform. It no longer screams, it whispers. And in the whisper, there is wisdom. An ancient, almost forgotten voice saying, "Sit, do not fear, I am the way." And you feel it, as if you were descending the steps of an inner temple, dark and silent, where that which you always avoided looking at resides, the hurt, the loss, the loneliness, the anger, the fear. Feelings that once seemed like monsters now show themselves as messengers. You begin to understand that emotions are not villains. They are keys, doors, invitations. Anger points to the places where you betrayed yourself. Sadness reveals the deep bonds that were broken. Guilt shows where you still believe you don't deserve it. Fear exposes the illusions you've embraced for safety. Each emotion, with its unique frequency, pulses like a secret code. And by deciphering them, you heal forgotten parts of yourself. Crying is no longer weakness. It's purification. Being silent is no longer emptiness. It's presence. Feeling deeply is no longer a risk. It's a ritual. You discover that, instead of holding you back, emotions pass through you. And when you allow them to follow their natural flow, something opens up inside you. A new space, a clarity, an almost sacred lightness. It's like diving into a dark lake and discovering that the bottom shines. The old impulse to repress gives way to active listening. You ask your tears what they mean. You embrace your anxiety like a frightened child. You hold your anguish by the hand and walk with it, without rushing. And in the midst of this surrender, you become the observer, the one who feels, but is not swallowed up, the one who sees, but does not judge, the one who listens, but does not rush to understand. And then, something begins to heal. Not by force, not by denial, but by the truth of the encounter. Because what heals at its root is not time, it is presence. And now you are present, whole, without a mask, without escape. The emotions that once imprisoned you now set you free, because you look them in the eye, because you accept the invitation, because you understand that, deep within every shadow, there is a light that only reveals itself to those who dare to remain. And you remain. You begin to notice the cracks, small distortions in the fabric of reality, as if the world that was once solid were dissolving, not to confuse you, but to free you. The routine loses its automaticity. Places no longer have the same weight. People talk, but it's as if you hear what's behind the words. A wall is no longer just a wall. An encounter is no longer just a coincidence. You begin to see beyond, as if matter had lost its dominance, and the invisible began to rule the scene. And then comes the subtle but profound revelation. The world outside is no longer separate from you. It responds. It echoes. It molds itself according to your inner state. When you vibrate fear, doors close. When you align with faith, small and grand miracles happen. An exact answer, an unlikely encounter, a silent protection. Reality bends, remakes itself, transforms itself so that you remember that nothing here is fixed. Time, once linear, now dances. The clock may mark the minutes, but inside you time stretches, contracts, disappears. You feel like you can be in two places at once, in your body and in your vision, in the now and in the eternal. Everything that seemed absolute begins to fall apart. Rules, certainties, boundaries, even your idea of me. And that's when you understand. True creation is born from within. You are a transmitter, a field, a frequency. What you vibrate is what you manifest. Not magically, but naturally, because the invisible is no longer a theory. It is your raw material. Prayer becomes an act of spiritual engineering. Silence, an access code. Clean thinking, a molding tool. You begin to build your reality like someone sculpting the air, and the more you trust this process, the more the old limits disappear. Logic loses its throne. Intuition takes over. The impossible approaches. And even when something seems to break, you recognize this too is in the service of reconstruction. You are no longer the same person who began this journey. Because now, when you look at reality, you don't see a fixed stage. You see a moving mirror, a reflection of your vibration. And in this recognition, you free yourself from rigidity, control, and fear. You begin to create with awareness, presence, and humility. And if you still have doubts, if something inside you resists, know this. This is also part of it. Reality will continue to distort itself. It will continue to dance until you are completely awake. Because the sacred does not fit into fixed molds. It moves. It calls you. And now, you are listening. If this dive touched something in you, if at some point in this journey something inside you whispered, "I already knew," then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments what you have seen when reality begins to unravel, so that the truth can finally emerge.